My name is Yvonne Sandomir, and I'm author of my memoir, The Invisible Girl, that was published by Legacy Book Press in November 2021. I am super excited that Boulder Bookstore has asked me to answer a few questions for them. And so I'm happy to do that. So the first question that they sent me is, can you tell us briefly about your story? So, briefly, my story is about overcoming childhood trauma to include sexual abuse, incest, witnessing domestic violence as a child, as well as experiencing it as a teenager, and how I overcame those things with the help of therapy and just really downright determination. Um, the second question is, why did you decide that you needed to write this book? Well, I wrote this book because it's not just my story. There are 42 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse in the United States alone. So I wrote my story because it's not just my story. I wrote it for all of the survivors out there to hopefully encourage them to seek the help that they need to heal from whatever may be holding them back in life from their childhood trauma. The next question is, did you find it difficult to write down your story, or was it a liberating experience? Well, I have two answers to this question. It was very difficult, yes. It was difficult to go through the childhood scenes, reliving those moments was not easy. However, at the end of the day, it was such a liberating experience because it really freed me from so much pain and past emotion that I had still kept stuffed deep down until I was able to release it through my words and from writing this book. So it was very liberating, a very rewarding experience that I am very thankful that I had the opportunity to do this. So the next question is, what's one way that people can support a loved one who has survived trauma? I love this question because it's actually very simple, and it's just being there for them, being a support person for them, being there just to listen. Sometimes survivors just need you to listen to what they have to say so they can feel heard. And that alone can really help someone that you love more than you may realize. And when someone comes to you with trauma, don't minimize it. If it's, especially if it's past trauma, do not tell them that it's in the past and, to just get over it. Because one thing I want people to understand is telling trauma survivors to just get over their past. It is like telling a shooting victim that, they didn't really get shot because it happened, however many years ago, but they know they still have the scar from that. And that scar will be with them for the rest of their lives. And that is the exact effect that child sexual abuse has on its victims. So that would be my biggest advice. Just be there. Just be there to listen when they need it. Okay, what advice do you have for other survivors of childhood trauma? Each one of us has a different story. Each one of us is in a different place in our healing journey, if you will. So, what I would say is allow yourself the space to be wherever you are right now, whether you're in a good place or in a not so good place. Honor where you are. But while doing that, acknowledge and realize that you deserve to heal. You deserve to tell your story. You deserve for someone to listen to you and hear what you have to say because you matter and your story matters. So, what I would encourage survivors to do, tell your story. You may not want to write a book about it, but you can, join podcasts such as mine. I'm a podcast host as well. There are places and people where you can find encouragement and advice when you need it. Now, I'm not a therapist and or anything like that. However, um, when I say that I understand how you feel, I mean it. I mean it, and I am sincere in my mission, I guess I could say, to give survivors a safe place to do that. So tell your story because it matters and you matter. So that's what I would tell to survivors. So the next question is, what have I been reading during the pandemic to stay hopeful? And really, I haven't been doing a lot of reading per se, but what I have been doing is avoiding news, avoiding anything that could be stressing or triggering, and just really focused on my memoir and marketing it and um, planning my book tour that I'm in the midst of right now in 2022. So, is there anything else you want us to know about your book? Yes, I want you to know that it's not all doom and gloom. There will be some difficult areas for readers, especially those who are survivors. There is a trigger warning at the beginning of the book, and so I want people reading it to be mindful. I want survivors who read it to take their time, not to try to rush through it, because they need to be mindful of their own mental health and where they are. And so, if it is too triggering, please put it down and then come back a little bit later. And, there's nothing wrong with, you know, skipping a few paragraphs or even a chapter if you feel like you need to. But at the end of the day, the message in the book is a hopeful one. It's inspirational. Um, it's positive, but not toxic positivity. um, there's just enough positivity, I think. Um, and yeah, that's it. And now the last thing that they've asked me to do is, can you read us a short passage from your book? And I would absolutely love to do that. So I haven't gone through to pick exactly what I want to read. I figured I would just kind of open the book and see where I land, and then we'll go from there. So let's see. We'll do this together. Da-da-da. Boop. Okay. So we're starting on page 40. I shook my head. Gavin put his arm around me and pulled me close. Sweetie, I know this is hard for you, but it's time to let go and let Laura help you. Do you think you can do that? I wanted to make Gavin proud, so I agreed to talk about one of the worst memories of my life. Laura looked at me and said, "Whenever you're ready." The truth is, I wasn't ready. I wanted to run out of that office, but I couldn't deny the anguish that developed over the months. Something changed me, and I just have to deal with it. I needed to expose the people who did horrible things to me, and Laura was going to hear about every single one. I needed to illuminate everything. So I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and began. At the age of 4, I developed my first compulsive behavior, and I remember the exact moment it started. My dad's Uncle Trevor lived a couple of trailers behind us. One night, my brother Michael and I spent the night with Uncle Trevor and his male roommate. I stopped to take a breath and looked up at Laura. She smiled and nodded for me to continue. At bedtime, Trevor tucked my brother in on the couch and led me to his bedroom to sleep. His bedroom was small, with the twin bed nestled up against the wall. I started to climb into bed with my one-piece romper, but Trevor stopped me and tossed one of his t-shirts on the bed for me to change into. Here, put this on, he said. The fear I felt as a young girl came rushing back, and it felt like it had just happened yesterday. I felt frightened, but changed into the nightgown anyway. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers over me. My heart was pounding and my hands felt cold and clammy. I was thousands of miles from that trailer, but at that moment, I felt the trauma happening all over again. I recalled every movement and ache of pain. I told Laura how I woke up the next morning to a weird sensation. I described the mahogany brown wood paneled walls surrounding me and the early morning sun beaming through the window above the bed. The draft drew chills to my body, but that wasn't my focus. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I looked down to find my blanket removed, my nightgown up around my waist, and my Uncle Trevor forcing oral sex onto me and his fingers inside me. The pain was intense, and I froze in fear. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. It was at that moment that I began discreetly rubbing my ear. I secretly counted out the numbers 80, 60, 40, 20, 100 in my head repeatedly until he finished. After Trevor had enough of me, he shook my legs to wake me, not knowing I was alert for the entire horrific ordeal. I couldn't pretend to sleep any longer. The reality of what just happened hit me, and my next goal was to escape. I blurted out the first thing my 4-year-old brain could conjure up and asked for a glass of milk. I followed Trevor to the kitchen and went back to the room with my milk. I watched as Trevor calmly walked back to the kitchen to start breakfast in front of the trailer. I looked both ways down the hall and saw 2 ways to get out: the front door where Uncle Trevor was, or the back door closer to me. I looked back at Trevor, and when he turned his back to me, I tiptoed to the back door, hoping he left it unlocked. I slowly turned the knob, and the door creaked open. Without a second thought, I dropped the glass of milk and ran out the back door in a desperate attempt to reach the safety of my parents. It was wintertime, so frigid air hit my face, and pain from the gravel bit my bare feet, but that didn't stop me from running away from my assailant. Trevor heard the glass break and turned to see me running. He emerged from the front door and started chasing behind me. Terror filled my body as his hurried steps got closer and closer. I started screaming for help. Mama, Mama, Mama. My anxiety rose as I recalled the event to Laura. It's one of the most painful betrayals of my life. And I felt myself slipping away from reality as if having an out-of-body experience. My mouth was moving and words were coming out, but I had no control over them. My pain took control. I thought I'd be safe if I made it to the front door, I heard myself saying. But when I turned the knob, it didn't open. I banged for my life. Bang, 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 while screaming, Mama, Mama, help. I knocked as hard as my little fist could, but no one answered my pleas for help. I paused for a moment, frozen from pain, as my mind went back to that day in 1983. And I'll stop there for now. That is page 42, which is from chapter 3. I want to thank Boulder Bookstore one more time for allowing me the opportunity to introduce you to The Invisible Girl, a memoir by me, Yvonne Sandomir. I hope that you read it and that you find the miracle of hope within yourself to become your true, authentic self. Thank you again.